I recently interviewed Ethan Weiner. He's been an audio engineer since the 1960s. Not only is he a bona fide audio expert, he literally wrote the book, The Audio Expert. Just like me, he's an evidence-based guy and he loves debunking all of the nonsense in the audio world. The difference, though, is he's been doing it since before I was born. I highly recommend his book. I've put a link to it in the description down below. Now, I'm not getting any kickback from that at all, but I just think the book's legit. It's even used as a key textbook teaching audio engineering at various universities. But anyway, the interview is about an hour long and I'm going to upload that very soon. But in the meantime, here's some highlights which I think you guys are going to dig from the debunking perspective. I asked him about fancy audio cables and this is what he said.
The stupidest of the wire frauds, and these are frauds, the people who sell this stuff are either stupid idiots and they don't even know that what they're selling is nonsense, or they're intentionally deceiving people. They're criminals. I mean, they're actually lying. They know they're lying, and they do it anyway to make money. But the stupidest of the wire frauds are the power cables. Power wires, they just have to be heavy enough. A $2.50 wire from the hardware store, as long as it's 16 gauge, 14, whatever you need with a preamp or something, you don't need much. If it's a 300 watt per channel power amp, then you need a heavier wire. But audio doesn't go through that as long as the thing can provide the power. So these claims of increased transparency and width, I love that. The imaging and the width is better, and the sound staging improves, and the bass tightness improves, and that's complete nonsense. It's just a lie. What I measured in a bedroom-sized space, I was actually measuring the effectiveness of bass traps, and I put a microphone at the listening position and then moved it over 4 inches and measured again. And the response was really, really different, even as low as, 20, 30, 40 hertz. There was a big difference. And you think, well, the wavelengths at 30 hertz or, 20 feet long or whatever, how could the response vary? It does, because there's so many competing reflections coming from all over the place, all over the room. So when people change their power cord or even their regular audio wires, and they sit down, now you're sitting over here, well, you're getting a completely different response. The stupid hi-fi magazines, I mean, these people are amateurs. They're really good at writing poetry, but they don't really know anything about audio. But it bothers me when you see quotes from professional mixing and mastering engineers, recording engineers, live sound people that work for famous artists, and they're promoting power wires and they're promoting other stupid stuff. That bothers me because they have credibility and people believe them. And so it makes it harder for me. I have to show graphs. I have to show proof that they're wrong. I have to show things like the response changing 4 inches apart in a room. This is why they believe this. But it's a good cause, and I keep doing it, and I applaud you for doing it too. So, you take a signal and you send it equally through 2 wires, and then at the opposite end, you flip the polarity of one wire and you mix them together. And if you have total silence, then that means the audio going through both wires is coming out at the other end exactly the same. So that was a really important thing because it proves that there's no parameters or aspects of audio or properties that engineers don't know about. And nulling has been around since 1940s. Hewlett-Packard's first distortion analyzers worked that way. They would put a 1 kilohertz tone or whatever through an audio device and then notch it out at the output with cancellation. And whatever was left was distortion, noise, hiss, hum, anything. And you could analyze the audibility of it. How loud is this distortion? Whether the makeup, how much third harmonic, how much second harmonic, whatever, how much IM distortion. They didn't have a lot of sophisticated analysis back then, but the concept of, notching out nulling out the 1 kilohertz test tone, this goes back, what's that, 80 years,
This is what he said about the saturation of expensive analog hardware.
And with the Neve consoles, if you overdrive them, and it's true, overdriving one preamp can sound different than another. I don't think it has anything to do with how much the preamp costs, that the more expensive ones sound better when overdriven. It doesn't have to be expensive. And I like distortion. I use overdrive plugins. I use, for both obvious distortion, like to fuzz up a guitar that wasn't fuzzy enough when I recorded the lead through an amp, or just add a little bit of grit, a little bit of, they call it glue, to a final mix. I like that. I believe in that. I've done that. Early digital recording, I recorded something digitally, And this was before we had CD burners. So I made a cassette to mail to a friend. And when I played the cassette, it sounded better. It had the hiss, but it sounded better. It sounded more like a record because of that slight distortion. So I was a believer. This is like 30 years ago, something like that. So I'm not opposed to that. But distortion doesn't have to be expensive. One of the articles I wrote for Audio Express magazine, and these are all linked on my articles page. The articles live on my website, or sometimes they link to, a magazine's website. Is a little device I made. It's just passive device with 2 diodes and 5 resistors and a capacitor called the Mojo Maestro, and it would add subtle or severe distortion with a knob. You turn the knob, and you can get different amounts of distortion. And there's example files you can download that go with the article when you download look at the schematic and read about how it works. So, to spend $7,000 on some, massive passive, summing mixer or something just because it has tubes and transformers, is just a waste of money. You don't need that. Now, I'm not opposed to people spending money if you have it. There are people, rich kids, whose daddies, millionaires, I don't mind that people spend money. And I like nicely made stuff. Things that are expensive a lot of times are really well made. Made like a battleship. They're not going to break down in the middle of a session if you're, Capitol Records or, some big A&R recording, whatever. And you're recording a movie soundtrack. You have 100 players all making, $250 an hour, plus the conductor, plus the studio. You don't want your direct box to fail in the middle or your preamps or whatever to break down. So I like well-made stuff. What bothers me is when you have these amateurs, they're kids, they're school kids, they're 20s, somethings, whatever, and they don't have a lot of money.
Expensive microphones.
You could buy 6 Audio-Technica 2020 microphones. To me, an Audio-Technica 2020, $100, is basically a U47, except it doesn't have the Omni option for a pickup pattern. But it's basically a transformerless U47. It sounds great. It's a big, large diaphragm condenser mic. And so you could buy 6 of those, or you could buy one, expensive mic. If you're a kid and you don't have an unlimited budget. And I'm not saying buy 6 of the same mic. Different mics sound different. Though mostly, really, it's just EQ and pickup patterns. But you should have small diaphragm microphones. They are very different than large diaphragm microphones. But my point is, you don't have to spend a lot of money unless you have it. If you have it and you like nice stuff and you want a lot of jewelry.
Whether room EQ can make a bad room sound good.
But it won't reduce the ringing in the room, the time component, where certain bass notes, the bass player goes, bup, 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 and the room is buh, 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 because that note sustains. So, and multiple subwoofers won't fix that.
So there are just a couple of clips from the interview I did. Stay tuned for the full-length version. I'm going to upload it very soon.